thank you for carving out the time in your busy schedule and taking the risk to come and listen to this idea of strategic narratives. And some of you I know because we work together. Some of you I don't. Danielle, right?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So some of you I know, some of you I don't. Sometimes some people on my list respond with, and I can recognize the name. So yeah, that's about it. So let's get started. We are scheduled for a half hour together today. And again, I want to thank you, Daniel, for making the time, carving out the time in your schedule to show up and see what this crazy idea of strategic narrative underground is about. So just a bit of logistics. I assume here everybody's familiar with Zoom, so everybody should be by now, right? We're going to stay 30 minutes together. I was wondering if we should expand this to 1 hour, but when I launched it, I thought 30 minutes is a manageable chunk of time, and I don't want, my goal is not to occupy too much of your schedule. And it's a series. I scheduled 10 meetings. Maybe it could go more or less, depends. If you are, some of you are not on my list, but if you've not signed up to my list, please do so at MetaHelm/daily. This is where you will receive updates about this work, and you will be notified about the upcoming meetings and the topics we will explore together. Why strategic narrative underground? I believe that narratives rule probably pretty much everything, and yet they are misunderstood. Everything we do has a narrative in it. We do things because we've heard a story before, either through education, our family, our society, the way we interact with colleagues, the way we work. I think they are misunderstood because over the past couple decades or so, there's been a big buzz about storytelling. And storytelling and narratives have been, the stories and narrative have been used interchangeably. And I would use it interchangeably all the time when I write and talk about it, until more recently, where I thought maybe there is a reason why there are two different names. Everyone wants to know a secret, so I figured that the name Underground kind of teased the appetite to come and join the conversation here. And this idea of making this an interactive experience came from one of my coaches called Philip Morgan. He's supposed to join the call today. I don't know. Philip is a little unpredictable sometimes, but he's a lovely guy. And he said, well, Guillaume, you've been doing a lot of writing lately. Why don't you share what you've been writing about? And I thought, yeah, that's great. That was Monday. So I took about 24 hours to decide if I should do this or not, and kind of put a concept together, and I launched it on Tuesday night. That's how much planning I put into this. And that's very much how I work. I like to work live. I like to work in the moment. I've always done that. I like to prep things at the last minute. And really the intention behind these calls is to create interaction and breathe life through the work that I've been doing. I'm not trying to sell you anything. There is nothing for sale. I'm not trying to hard sell anything. If you're interested in my services, of course, we can talk about it, but this isn't a webinar. This isn't a sales call. This is really, hopefully, an interaction and a genuine conversation with people who find this topic interesting and of value. I keep getting the story question, and I've kept getting this question for many, many years. It started probably in the late 90s. I was working as a young consultant, in many different capacities, and this kind of recurring question, I started to notice this pattern, in fact, of, hey, we what's our story? We don't have our story straight. We should work on our story. And that was really the time where the word story was getting really, really cool, because we thought, oh, we can bring in something creative artistic. We can bring a discipline that weaves in emotion into a world that traditionally is not really open to this, the world of business. And so that has created a lot of good things. Others have covered the topic of strategic narrative. I'm not the only one. I didn't come up with that term. It's a pretty undefined term. If you look it up, people have different definitions about it. What separates me from other definitions is that distinction between story and narrative. There is one common point, though, which is that the sense of coming up with a narrative to change something in the future. That was a hint that got me interested in finding out about this difference between story and narrative. So to me, this is still a very emerging idea. But it's that idea, I have to admit, has been in front of me that whole time. After 23 years of consulting, it's always been there, but I just noticed it recently. It's almost like, you walk in this library and there's a whole bunch of books, and you browse through the books, and then all of a sudden you pull this book and a secret door opens to a whole new world, a whole new understanding behind one word, the word narrative. In doing some research, like I said, I'm not the only one talking about this topic. Actually, the topic of narrative change is pretty common in the realm of policy making. You look up narrative change is something. It's actually starting to be a recognized practice, starting to be communities, trainings, manuals, practices around this idea. So here I am. I've written 7 days a week about this topic now for several months. So beware, if you sign up to my list, you're going to get a lot of emails, but it's okay to delete them. I got a question from a reader the other day saying, how would you advise that I organize all the emails you send in my inbox? And my reply was, just delete them. I tend to repeat myself. What I practice through that daily mailing list is called cow pathing, another concept from Philip Morgan. And it's really designed to think in public. So I write those emails, barely edit them. Usually it happens hopefully in the morning, but sometimes late at night. But I make a point going back to that practice because I'm a professional, and that's what professionals do. They train every day, and I'm dedicated to this. So the goal of this exercise here is, directly linked to the idea of narratives. Narratives are different than story, in my opinion. A story you can consume on your own. It could be an individual or collective exercise, but you can read a good story. You can share a good story with one person, but narratives are really about creating a sense of community. And if you look and think about the origins of the word community, it ties to the idea of communion, getting together, gathering together around a common idea, a common belief, right? And that's how human beings have been able to survive for a long time, is through the capacity to imagine stories. So when I mean narrative, I don't mean storytelling. You've got that already. I mean really this mental framework that helps us collaborate better together. So there is this very strong focus on a call to action. And I think that's what businesses should really be focusing on in the current context. And I'll come back to that. So the goal of a narrative is to drive meaningful change, not to sell more stuff. And I say this because a lot of people in marketing think of story as the great wrapper around the product, the cool pitch that makes any mediocre stuff worth $1 million for a moment. And that's not the topic that I want to cover. That I'm not interested in this. Others do it very, very well, and they do it with very helpful methodology. And that's great. But I'm more about how do we trigger change? How do we rally people to build meaningful businesses that can maybe change the world for the better? So hopefully I clarified a little bit and put some meaning around the word narrative. So I want to make a brief pause here, see if there are any questions. And then what I have for you in the next 17 or 18 minutes is I want to talk a little bit about the pattern language that I've been building and ask you a question and then give you access to the book. But first, I'll just take a sip and see if there's any questions. All right, let's keep going. So I'm inviting you to take a look at this idea of a pattern language. It's a book. How many of you are familiar with the concept of pattern language? If you don't have your camera on, just raise your hand or just show me. So Bob is, Lauren a little bit. Is that it? Cool. So it's worth maybe talking a little bit about this. So the term pattern language comes from a book written in 1977 by Christopher Alexander. Christopher Alexander went to Harvard. He's an architect, and he went to Harvard. And after Harvard, during Harvard, tries to figure out what architecture is all about. So he's interested in boiling down the big idea of architecture. And shortly after that, he's offered to build a new village of about 600 people in India. And he knows how to do it. He's got all the skill, the knowledge. He's in about his mid-20s, and he's a super smart, super knowledgeable and skilled architect. And he's really excited about this opportunity, and he thinks that's the chance of his life. He's lived in India, and so he knows Indian culture, some of it, and he's really engaged there. But something inside tells him that this isn't the right thing to do. He ends up refusing the work because he thinks that although he knows all the practices and the architectural principles and rules to design a village, it's not his responsibility to do it. Like, he thinks that if he's going to do that, he's going to miss the most important, which is that the real life of the village should come from people, should really come from the people in the village. So he knew he was going to be wrong. And he says, like, it's one thing to know, but it's another thing to activate it. And the point was to create a new kind of transitional village at the time, not to replicate, the traditional village model. So the point was to innovate and propose a new version of a village. And he knows that people have the patterns to, in them to build this village. And he works, and so he declines the offer and starts working on this idea of documenting those patterns to build better communities. That's an evolved version of his book. So he comes up with the book in 1977, and the book has 253 patterns. So it's a pretty big book. I have a digital copy of it. You can find it on Amazon, or I think it exists on PDF. And it takes him 10 years to work on this book, 10 years. And really his questions is, what are the specific ways to build new communities? So starting to see the relationship with the idea of narrative. So it was clear to him that geometric was the substance he was working on, but he was really compelled to revisit, the laws of geometries. And he thinks that when you do architecture, when you do design, you constantly make choices, and that those choices are an opportunity for you to bring life or not to whatever you're building. So he tries to understand that. And after his book is released, it has massive implication for many, many many domains, especially domains where engineering is practiced as a community. So patterns are applied to many complex engineering tasks. And in fact, in 1995, when Ward Cunningham created the first wiki, the ancestor of Wikipedia, that's what he uses. He uses patterns. So that's the type of book I'm trying to write. Alexander has 253 patterns in his book, and I only have 10 for now. But I already listed about 25 more, and it could take me years to write it. So I decided it wasn't worth waiting for this whole thing to be complete, especially these days. We can easily share it and invite people to take a look at it. So that's what this book is about. Has really influenced my my approach very heavily. I found out about this concept only last fall. I had been working on an idea for a book for about a year, and I could not get. I was just spinning in circle. I didn't know what kind of book it was. I knew I had something to say, but I didn't know what the format was going to be, and I wrote 8 drafts of shit. It's really bad. I was really unhappy with it, and then this finally this format, the structure, came as a great way to help and make some progress. So pattern languages are used to build softwares, are used to build buildings, are used to build all sorts of stuff. Why I believe that it should be applied to narratives is because when we think about narratives, there is inherently the temptation to judge a narrative based on style and taste. It's a very aesthetic thing, right? And for those in branding or marketing or other artistic, disciplines with an artistic connection there, that I'll leave it at that. You might have heard before, when you present a work to somebody, a piece of work to someone, or when you want a client to give you feedback, you will hear always, I don't like it. I think it should be this color, that color, because I don't like it. And what a pattern language helps you do is to move away from the like or don't like, because in the end, that's not really how, that's not the only way to judge design work. Design work should be judged by, is this working or not? So it's a lot more factual, right? And so the whole goal of a pattern language is to create points of reference and landmarks and criteria to make better decisions based on that framework, on a framework that is hopefully, based on, is what we're building working or not? In the case of Alexander, what he was trying to get to is, how can we build cities, villages, communities where people enjoy living? There was this definition of, does this work, or does this, or are we off here? So in my goal is to do the same with narratives, is to provide a framework of reference to help you understand what is a strategic narrative, how to create a better one, and when you see one, how to see if it's working or not. I will show you this document at the very end of this call. My goal today is not to go over the document. I'll let you read it, and if you want to come back next Thursday, and we can talk about some of the chapters and discuss that. But before we get there, I have a question for you. You signed up for this call. Some of you read my list every day. And I'm curious about one thing is, what is happening right now in the world that makes the topic of strategic narrative urgent for you to explore? I'm not fishing for an answer. I'm just genuinely asking you, what is happening right now around you that makes this topic really urgent to understand? Anyone?
So I'll jump in. Hey, Guillaume, it's my work too, and what is happening is that I have situations where something needs to be communicated. For example, like right now, today, I have to write for a client an announcement of a new brand. I know the brand is right. I know the overall idea is right. As an example, it's not, and we've got to send it to a list, but the current list is not the list that we want it to be over time, right? It's not the clients that we want it to be over time. So I have to think about, how do I frame this so that it's relevant to the people who are reading it, right? How do I make it more compelling? How do I make them care? Mm-hmm. So, and that's basically what I have to figure out all day, every day is, you know, how do you take something that's is strategically correct, but language it in a way that makes people want to be involved, because I would say 96% of the time what you read doesn't make me want to be involved.
But that's is that a new thing, Robert? Or it has always always been there, right?
Yes. It's not a new thing. I think what's interesting is that you're positioning yourself as, you know, as having a way, right? Which I think is and it's a way about something that's deeply relevant for me, and so
so it's relevant to you in your work.
Interested and more than interested. Got you.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. But if we explore now around us in the world, you know, I mean, obviously some people say we're in the post-pandemic, you know, that's the new buzzword now. But that's not the only thing happening. There's so many other things happening in the world.
Yeah, life goes on, right? I mean, there's the pandemic, and we just all have to have our lives in the context of that, right? Wherever that pandemic happens to be on that day, we still have to do our work and have our lives.
Right. Yeah, Bob. Hi again.
Hi. For my specific context, I do research communications, a lot of science communications. And we talk a lot in that world about framing and reframing, which you know, I will be very interested, Guillaume, in your thoughts about how strategic narrative relates to framing. But your emphasis on, and Alexander's emphasis on community being an anchor for constructing a strategic narrative, that it really isn't anything outside the community, is really important, especially now for communicating research and communicating science. We've seen numerous failures over the past year and a half where we haven't connected with communities. And so I'm very interested in how do we think about narrative where it isn't just framing and hoping that we can connect with a community, but that it comes organically out of a community.
Would you be able to give us maybe an example of failure or success? You use the word failure to connect with the community.
Well, it's not clear exact that, but there's some suspicion, quite a bit of suspicion, for example, that the recent pause in and the way that pause around the J&J vaccine was communicated has spurred a lot of vaccine hesitancy. So the way that pause was communicated was perfectly in keeping with the way public health has communicated what it does, but it was divorced from where the community was, or where communities were in terms of their uncertainty about vaccines. And so the messaging was developed and the framing was developed apart from the community. Yeah. And I think it led to, it is quite possible that it potentially led to a dramatic increase in vaccine hesitancy at a time when that could be very unfortunate.
That could be very, yeah, absolutely. I love this example because that's exactly how I think about the potential of narrative. Is really being in a world where, yeah, we get to be more inclusive, but in the biggest sense of it. I don't want to be too philosophical here, but that's, I mean, the problems we're facing, it's not going to come from the sole genius, right? It's going to come from an open network of people thinking about it and engaging those communities. And how does this work? So good. Any other thoughts? I'll ask again that question in our next call, maybe, so get to think about it. We're getting close to the end. How does 30-minute feel? Good enough? Short enough? You want to talk more? Probably right, I'm guessing.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, cool. Well, let's get to the product part of this experience. I'm going to share my screen with you and show you what this looks like at the moment. And then I'll let you go back to your day. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. That's what this draft looks like. Right now, it's maybe 30 pages. This is metadata. This is me thinking about how do I call this? How do I give this a subtitles? These are old. Some people have already commented, and you will be. I'm going to give you a link with the possibility to comment. So comment away, or just don't. Whatever you feel like. I read all those comments. I might need to clear them after a while. So there's an intro, still a work in progress again, like I said. And then that's the series of the 10 patterns that I was talking about. Each pattern is organized the same way, in the true pattern language fashion. There's some slight evolutions, but basically that's it. There's a name because we're talking about a language. So language are made of words. And so this one is called narrative. Then there is a problem statement. I try to encapsulate what is this name, what is this pattern trying to solve, what potentially could it solve. And then there is a discussion about it. This discussion is obviously my point of view on it. I don't think I have the truth, but it's based on my experience. In the future, I intend to do research, quantitative and qualitative research on these aspects, and then probably I'll refine those thoughts. But I write them in a way that is short enough that it could be, read quickly and spark some thoughts. Because when you work on narratives, what happens, the biggest problem is amnesia. We forget, because by definition, a narrative is intrinsic, right? It's something we're not aware of. So when we're doing this work, we're pulling the narrative out our head, we're workshopping it, and somehow it gets constructed socially and goes back into our behaviors. At the end of each pattern, you will see a series of what I call rules, that are declarations of what you should be when you want to use this pattern. And some people have read this document and say, oh, these are great. I'd want to print this, maybe put that on the side of my desk just to be reminded of what I should do. So I'll let you read that document. Some of the patterns at this stage start to have examples. Like the last one I wrote, I'm taking the example of a CEO who's the founder of a US based, and actually in Oregon, a company that does electric vehicles. And he has a great way to share his origin story. To me, a story is the origin story is one of the patterns that you use to build a narrative. Some of them have examples, some of them don't yet. My plan is to add visuals too, and you will see this grow over time. So that's the document. And with that, I'll copy the link here. I will give it to you in the chat, and I will also email it to you a little bit later. But if you wanted to take a look now, you can certainly do so. there you have it. A scary moment for me. I do a journal, a daily journal, you know, and every day on this journal there is a quote from someone. And this morning I opened my journal and I see this: "No one ever achieved greatness by playing it safe." That's timely. April 29th. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to wrap us up, but if you have burning questions, I have a few more minutes. I don't want to hold anyone to their commitments. Just let me know what we should do.
Thank you, Guillaume. I have to run, but thank you. Looking
welcome.
forward to future sessions.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to reading it.
Thank
Don't
you.
be scared.
Thank you,
I'm sure
Guillaume.
it's great.
Yeah,
The topic is very intriguing.
Yeah, I'm very interested to learn more, and I commend you for putting yourself out there. It is scary, and
Yeah.
it takes a brave person to do that. So, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Wait until you see the document, you read it. And yeah, no, I embrace the idea of feedback, and I've always tried to behave courageously in my life. I hope it inspires others to do it. You know, I try to make good use of my privileges in this world, and show that, you know, a lot more than we think is possible. I'm trying, actually, it's kind of it's interesting. I'm trying to evolve my own narrative. If you asked me 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever in the past, I would never have thought I would be doing this today. Never, ever. First of all, I had no idea I would be living in the United States, talking English to people. So thank you for your compliment.